Let me ask you a simple question, okay? Have you ever seen or perhaps met someone making 10 times more money than you and thought to yourself, how the hell is this guy doing this? How is he beating me? How is he making so much money? And I used to think this exact same thing when I first started out in business and even when I had a small amount of success. But the biggest turning point for me was when Alex Hormozi invited me to Vegas to an event and I finally got the chance to meet these people, and honestly, it pissed me off. Because let me just tell you this right now, these people weren't smarter than me, they weren't more disciplined than me, and they definitely weren't doing 100-hour weeks. And the craziest part is some of these guys were weird. Like, I'm talking like the social autist at school that used to play Yu-Gi-Oh at lunchtime. But yeah, that was me back then anyway. But that's besides the point, right? Because I'm not like that anymore. But the point is, clearly these guys understand something about making money that you don't understand. So I took it upon my duty to figure out what it was, and I finally cracked the code. I make hundreds of thousands of dollars per year effortlessly. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can set up the next 12 weeks of your life and what you need to do and what you need to think so you can make more money in the next 12 weeks than most people will in the next 12 months, okay? So let's jump on the computer and we'll get straight into it. So I was watching an interview the other day where Michael Jordan, one of the best basketballers of all time, was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, what's the secret to your success? To which Michael Jordan replied that he fell in love with the game. And the reason why I think this is amazing is because it applies to the game of business too. Just think about it like this, okay? If you only love, okay, the main thing that you want, which is making money, then you have to understand that in business, it takes a long time to actually make some money. And then even if you're trying to scale from maybe 10K to like 100K a month, that's a different beast within itself, okay? So you might get some results for a period of time, you know, but you're not really making significant progress. But then down the line, it just compounds, okay? So this might be, you know, month 6 to month 12, or perhaps even month 3. Okay, so if you're only motivated by money and you're not seeing any money, then guess what? You're going to be unmotivated. And on top of that as well, you're just going to burn out. I see a lot of people talking about how they burn out in business, but then I just asked them, like, bro, if you were making, you know, $20,000, $30,000, $100,000 a month, would you really burn out? And the answer is like, probably no. So what you need to learn to do instead is you need to learn to fall in love with the process of making money. Because imagine there's two people, okay? So you have guy number 1 over here, and then you have guy number 2 over here, okay? Just pretend that that looks like a human, okay? Or even like a stick figure. So this guy here, he just loves making money. You know, he works every day and he makes no money for 6 months. But then this guy over here, again, he loves making money, but he also loves the game of completing tasks every single day, and he makes no money for 6 months. Who do you think is actually going to stick to this thing for 6 months and give it their all every single day? Well, it's obviously the second guy here, okay? Because he's willing to withstand the period where there's no results because he enjoys turning up every single day. Now, this begs the question, how do you actually fall in love with business? Because this happened to me recently, okay? So my business was doing about $0 to $30,000 a month, okay? So when I started my business, obviously it was on fucking zero, right? But then I got to this point where I was making $30,000 a month consistently, okay? And then eventually I moved to Thailand and I started learning how to train Muay Thai. And I stopped, you know, enjoying my business as much. And then naturally my income just started declining. And then eventually I reached a point where I made like 10K in a month, and I was like, holy shit, like that's absolutely unacceptable. So then I realized, okay, I need to learn to fall in love with the game again. So then I did a basic audit of my life, and I was like, okay, why don't I enjoy business anymore? What am I doing in my free time, okay? So in my free time, I was smoking a lot. You know, I was talking to girls, okay? So, you know, I was going out with girls, doing whatever men do with girls. You know, we're gonna keep it family friendly here. And essentially, you know, I was just scrolling on Instagram and like doing a bunch of these things, right? And the problem with doing these things is they release an insane amount of dopamine. And when your body artificially releases insane amounts of dopamine from these kinds of things, business, which also releases dopamine, feels boring. Why? Because these negative habits that I'm talking about, you know, they release like, okay, if we had to draw a chart, you know, they release like massive amounts of dopamine, but your business might only release a little bit. Okay, because it's a natural means, okay? And what this means is this no longer feels good compared to doing these things. So your mind's gonna feel numb when you're working on your business, you're gonna feel bored, and you're not gonna wanna stick with it. So what I did instead was I did a complete 5-day, okay, dopamine detox, okay? Is that dopamine detox, DD. So I did a 5-day dopamine detox and I got absolutely, dialed the fuck in. And what happened next was crazy. I actually stopped not only enjoying my business, but I stopped enjoying going to the gym. All of a sudden, the gym felt amazing, business felt amazing. And it was basically effortless now to produce content and work 12-hour days. Meanwhile, before, I would work like 1 hour and I'd feel like I was losing my mind, okay? So that's how you need to learn how to fall in love with the game again. So another reason why these weird people are like hyper successful in business is because the way they approach their goals. So what most people will do is like January will come around, or perhaps, the end of December, and they'll set a goal, okay? So a normal goal might be, okay, I want to make $100,000 a month, I want to make 100K a year, whatever, okay, by the end of the year. Now, the problem with doing this is most people by February, they've already given up, and by the time it's April, like they're completely off the trajectory to achieving their goals. But here's where the danger comes in. Because it's only April, they think that they have 8 months of the year left. So it feels like they have enough time, okay? So this is essentially a principle called Parkinson's Law. So Parkinson's Law states that the more time you give yourself to achieve a goal, the more you're going to procrastinate until near the deadline, and that's where you're actually going to improve. So if you look at any major business, okay, most of their revenue comes near the end of the year, okay, so that would be in October, to December. And most people will say, yeah, that's because it's the last quarter of the year, they have Christmas and all these different things, but that's not actually the truth. The reason why most businesses make the most money at the end of the year is because at the start of the year in January, they set a goal for how much they want to make. They kind of fucked around and procrastinated in this period, and then when the last quarter of the year comes in, they're like, oh shit, we need to get our foot on the gas, we need to get things going, and they do everything that they can to achieve the goals. Now, what's the moral of the story here? The moral of the story is these successful people that I've met, they didn't work in 12-month blocks, okay? But rather, they worked in 12-week blocks, okay? So you might have heard entrepreneurs talking about, Q1, Q2, and things like that, right? The first quarter of the year, the second quarter of the year, the third quarter, okay? But it's not really useful to think like that, okay? Because if you're watching this video in July, you're not gonna wait till the third quarter of the year to try and become successful. So what you wanna do is, instead of thinking as 1 year, okay, as 12 months, I want you to start seeing 1 year as 12 weeks. And I promise you, this is gonna make all the difference in your life. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna think about the next 12 weeks. You wanna set a realistic goal. So if your goal is to make 10K a month by the end of the year, you might say, I wanna make my first 3K, okay? And then what you're going to do is you're going to create a daily plan to actually achieve that, okay? You're going to create a daily plan, and you're going to focus only on this plan every single day. You're not going to worry about tomorrow. You're not going to worry about next month. You're not going to worry about November. You're only going to worry about each day as it comes, okay? So I like to call this working in day-tight compartments. So how do you actually know what to do every single day for the next 12 weeks to make a lot of money and become successful? Well, let me tell you about this, okay? So there were a bunch of dudes, okay, and they were told build some boats, and you're basically gonna race each other, okay? So there's guy 1 over here, and then you have boat number 2, okay? These motherfuckers, this is my perfect drawing of a boat, okay? And they were told, okay, design these boats, and you basically have to race each other and you have to win. So the first guys over here, they were worried about, the color of the boat, okay? They were worried about, the design of the boat, how it looked aesthetically. But these guys here, every time they made a modification to the boat, they asked themselves, does this make the boat go faster? Okay, every single thing they did, they asked themselves, does this make the boat go faster? Because the whole purpose of the race was to win. So whether the color or the design, whatever looked great, the question is, does it make the boat go faster? And I see a lot of entrepreneurs running their businesses like this when they should be running them like this. You need to ask yourself, what is one task that I can do every single day that's actually going to start bringing money into my pocket? So for example, if you run an agency, okay, then this is going to be like cold calls, okay? If you run a coaching business, it's going to be creating content, okay? If you run, I don't know, perhaps I was going to say OnlyFans management, but we're not even going to talk about that, okay? But you get the point. You have to ask yourself, what's one task that I can do every single day that's actually going to start bringing revenue into my business? So what I like to call these is revenue. I'm going to have my perfect opportunity to try and write this out. Revenue generating, okay? We'll try activity. I ain't even gonna fucking write, but you need to focus on what's called revenue generating activities, okay? Because these are the things that are gonna bring money to your pocket. So if you're at this point in the video and you're still struggling to be able to take action on revenue generating activities, then you probably need to start working on your identity. And if you wanna start working on your identity, then go watch this video here.